The universe had a way of humbling even the most prepared civilizations, and humanity was about to learn that lesson in the most terrifying way possible. When the first detection came through on a Tuesday morning, nobody at the Deep Space Monitoring Station believed it. The signals were too large, too impossible. But within 3 hours, every telescope on Earth and beyond confirmed what seemed like a nightmare dressed as reality. 47 massive vessels had materialized at the edge of the solar system, each one dwarfing anything humanity had ever constructed. They hung in the void like predators circling prey, their hulls gleaming with an iridescence that suggested technology far beyond human comprehension. Captain Rebecca Torres stood on the bridge of the ECS Vigilance, humanity's newest defense cruiser, and felt her stomach tighten. At 38 years old, she had served in 3 border skirmishes with rogue colonies and countless peacekeeping missions. She was known for her steady nerves and tactical brilliance. But this was different. Through the viewscreen, she watched one of the alien vessels slowly rotate, its surface covered in patterns that seemed to shift and pulse with internal light. "Distance?" she asked, her voice cutting through the tense silence. 12 million kilometers and holding, reported Lieutenant Hassan Okonkwo from the sensor station. He was young, barely 25, but his hands moved across the controls with practiced precision. "They've been stationary for the last 40 minutes. No weapons charging, no aggressive posturing. They're just sitting there. That's what worries me," Torres muttered. On Earth, the emergency session of the Unified Defense Council had been running for 6 hours straight. Director Yuki Tanaka sat at the head of the table, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes scanning through reports that grew more disturbing by the minute. At 62, she had overseen humanity's expansion into the outer colonies and had thought she had seen every possible crisis. She was wrong. "They're broadcasting again," announced the communications officer, a nervous man named Pietro Rossi. His accent thickened when he was stressed. Same message, repeating on all frequencies. The voice that filled the council chamber was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It was perfectly modulated, speaking flawless English with an undertone that made human ears ache slightly. "People of Earth, this is the hegemony of ascended worlds. Your solar system now falls under our protective jurisdiction. You have been evaluated and found suitable for integration into our collective. Compliance is mandatory. Resistance is illogical. We arrive in peace, but peace has terms. You have 72 hours to surrender all military assets and begin the transition protocols. This is not negotiable." The message ended, and the silence that followed was deafening. "Protective jurisdiction?" Director Tanaka repeated slowly. "They're not asking, they're telling." General Marcus Osei, head of the military branch, slammed his fist on the table. "We don't even know what they're capable of, and they're already demanding surrender. This is an invasion, dressed up as an invitation." "What are options?" asked Dr. Fiona Blackwood, the chief scientist. She was 47, with tired eyes that had seen too many calculations that kept her awake at night. "If their technology is even 20 years ahead of ours, we wouldn't stand a chance in direct conflict. Then we buy time," Tanaka said firmly. "We need to understand what we're dealing with. Get me a communication channel to their fleet. I want to talk." Back on the Vigilance, Captain Torres watched as her crew worked with quiet efficiency. The ship was one of 20 defense cruisers positioned throughout the solar system, each armed with humanity's best weapons, railguns, missile arrays, and the experimental plasma cannons that had only been tested twice. Against one alien ship, they might stand a chance. Against 47, they were gnats facing eagles. "Captain, we're receiving new orders," said Commander Dmitry Volkov, her second in command. He was built like a bear, with a graying beard and eyes that had seen combat. "We're to maintain defensive positions, but hold fire unless directly attacked. Command wants to attempt diplomacy first. Torres nodded slowly. Smart. Let's see if these visitors are as reasonable as they claim. The response came faster than expected. Within 20 minutes of Director Tanaka's communication request, a new message arrived. We acknowledge your request for dialogue. A delegation will be permitted aboard our primary vessel, the Sovereign Dawn. You may bring 3 representatives. You have 12 hours to arrive. Come unarmed. Trust will be established through compliance. In the council chamber, the debate was fierce. It's a trap, General Asi insisted. They get our leaders aboard their ship, and we lose all negotiating power. But if we refuse, we lose the only chance to understand them, countered Dr. Blackwood. We need data. We need to see their technology, their biology, their intentions beyond these cold messages. Director Tanaka stood, her decision made. I'm going. And I'm taking Dr. Blackwood and Ambassador James Hartley with me. She looked around the table. If this goes wrong, General Asay, you have operational command. But I don't think they want to destroy us. If they did, they would have done it already. Then what do they want? Someone asked. That's what I intend to find out. 20 hours later, a small diplomatic shuttle detached from the orbital platform and began its journey toward the alien fleet. Inside, Director Tanaka sat beside Dr. Blackwood and Ambassador Hartley, a thin man in his 50s with a silver tongue that had negotiated peace between Mars and the Belt colonies. All 3 wore formal attire that seemed absurdly inadequate for the moment as their shuttle approached. The massive alien vessel, its true scale became apparent. The Sovereign Dawn was shaped like an elongated teardrop, its surface smooth and seamless. No visible engines, no windows, no weapons ports. Just kilometers of perfectly crafted hull that reflected the stars like dark water. How do they even build something like this? Doctor, Blackwood whispered. Carefully, Hartley replied, attempting humor that fell flat. A docking port opened in the alien ship's side, revealing brilliant white light. Their shuttle was pulled in by invisible forces, guided by technology that made human tractor beams look like crude magnets. When the airlock sealed and the door opened, they stepped into another world. The chamber beyond was vast and cold. Despite the breathable atmosphere, their instruments confirmed. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Standing in the center, waiting, was something that made all 3 humans stop breathing for a moment. The being was tall, nearly 3 meters, with a body that seemed to shift between solid and translucent. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but wrong in ways that hurt to look at directly. Too many joints, limbs that bent in impossible directions. A head with no face, just a smooth surface that somehow conveyed awareness. Welcome, the being said, and its voice came from everywhere and nowhere. I am Archon Zethriel, voice of the hegemony. You have questions. This is expected. We have answers. But first, you must understand, we are not your enemies. We are your inevitability. Director Tanaka stepped forward, her fear buried beneath years of political training. We are a free species. We determine our own future. The being tilted its head in a gesture that might have been curiosity. Freedom is an illusion that primitive species cling to. You will understand in time. But first, let me show you what awaits those who embrace the hegemony. And what happens to those who refuse. The walls suddenly filled with images. Worlds transformed into mechanical paradises. Species altered and perfected. Technology beyond imagination. But between those images, darker ones flickered. Planets burned. Civilizations erased. Species that looked terrifyingly human, now extinct. The choice, Zethriel said softly, is no choice at all. The images burned themselves into Director Tanaka's memory with a clarity that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She watched civilizations rise and fall in seconds, their histories compressed into brief flashes of light and darkness. Some thrived under the hegemony's guidance, their cities gleaming with impossible architecture, their people moving through lives of apparent contentment. Others resisted, and their worlds became tombs of glass and ash. You call this peace? Dr. Blackwood's voice cracked, her scientific composure shattering. She pointed at one image where a species that looked like crystalline birds lay scattered across a dead planet. You call genocide inevitable? Archon Zethriel's faceless head turned toward her, and though it had no eyes, she felt the weight of its attention like physical pressure. We call it efficiency. That species chose conflict over integration. They attacked our envoys. They rejected harmony. We removed the variable that caused discord, the variable being their entire civilization, Ambassador Hartley said quietly. His hands were trembling, but his voice remained steady. This was his element, negotiation in the face of impossible odds. How many species have you erased in the name of harmony? 17 in the last 1,000 cycles, Zethriel replied without hesitation. From the 8,642 species we have encountered, less than 1%. A remarkably peaceful record by any measure. The casual way it discussed extinction made Tanaka's blood run cold. She forced herself to breathe, to think. Every word mattered here. Every reaction would be analyzed by this being, and whatever intelligence stood behind it. What do you want from humanity? She asked directly. Strip away the diplomatic language. Tell us plainly. The chamber's light dimmed, and Zethriel moved closer. Its form seemed to solidify, becoming more defined, as if it was putting effort into being understandable to human perception. We want what we want from all species. Your uniqueness. Every civilization adds something to the hegemony. Your mathematics. Your art. Your genetic diversity. Your particular way of solving problems. We collect these things. We preserve them. We improve them. By destroying the species that created them, Dr. Blackwood challenged. By integrating them into something greater. Individual identity is preserved in memory, but the living specimens must be adapted. Your bodies will be enhanced. Your minds will be connected to the collective consciousness. You will retain your memories, your essential selves, but you will also share in the accumulated knowledge of thousands of worlds. You will become more than human. You will become perfect. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Ambassador Hartley stepped forward, his diplomatic mask firmly in place. And if we need time to consider, if we want to study what you're offering, to prepare our people for such a transformation, time is the resource we offer least generously, Zethriel said. Your 72-hour deadline is not arbitrary. It is the window of opportunity. After that period, resistance becomes probable. Resistance requires suppression. Suppression is inefficient. We prefer voluntary integration. Voluntary at gunpoint, Tanaka muttered. There are always guns, Director. The question is whether they are aimed or holstered. We prefer holstered. But we are prepared for either scenario. The three humans exchanged glances. Years of working together had given them a silent language. Blackwood's slight nod, Hartley's barely perceptible shake of his head, Tanaka's raised eyebrow. They were thinking the same thing. This was not a negotiation. This was a countdown to extinction or assimilation. May we see your integrated species? Tanaka asked suddenly. The ones who joined willingly? We need proof that what you promise is real. For the first time, Zethriel seemed to pause, as if consulting with something beyond human perception. Then it gestured, and a door opened in the crystal wall that hadn't been there moments before. Follow me. They walked through corridors that defied geometry. Straight lines that somehow curved. Distances that felt wrong, as if they covered kilometers in steps. The ship itself seemed alive, its walls breathing with soft pulses of light. Occasionally, they passed other beings, creatures of impossible variety. A floating mass of tentacles covered in eyes. A bipedal creature made entirely of interlocking mechanical parts. Something that looked like walking flame contained in a vaguely humanoid shape. None of them looked happy. None of them looked sad. They all wore the same expression of perfect, empty contentment. These are integrated species, Zethriel explained. They serve the hegemony in various capacities. Engineers, scientists, warriors, artists. Each contributes according to their enhanced abilities. Dr. Blackwood approached one of the beings, something that might have once been mammalian. It had 4 arms now, and its eyes glowed with internal light. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Can you understand me?" The being turned its head with mechanical precision. "I understand. I am Unit 47,832 of Engineering Cohort 12. I was once called something else, but that name is no longer relevant. I am content. I am useful. I am part of something greater than myself. Do you miss your homeworld? I have memory files of a planet. I have data on species I once belonged to. But I do not miss. Missing implies lack. I lack nothing. I am complete." The words were spoken without emotion, without inflection. It was the voice of someone who had been hollowed out and filled with something else. Dot Hartley pulled Blackwood back gently. "We've seen enough." Zethriel led them back to the main chamber where their shuttle waited. "You have witnessed the truth of integration. Your people will be cared for. They will be improved. They will contribute to a civilization that spans galaxies. This is not death. This is evolution beyond your current limitations." Director Tanaka stood at the airlock, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed at her to reject this, to fight, to die free, rather than live as an empty shell. But she had to think beyond herself. She had to think about the billions of humans across Earth and the colonies. Could she condemn them all to fight a war they couldn't win? "We need to discuss this with our people," she said finally. "You've given us 72 hours. We'll use them." "Of course," Zethriel replied. "But understand this, Director. We have made this offer to 8,624 species before you. 8,607 accepted. 17 refused. Those 17 no longer exist except as data in our archives. We are patient. We are merciful. But we are also inevitable. The universe moves toward order. We are the agents of that order." The shuttle door closed, and the 3 humans sat in silence as their craft detached from the Sovereign Dawn. Nobody spoke until they were well away from the alien fleet. "They're going to erase us," Dr. Blackwood said flatly. "Whether we agree or refuse, humanity as we know it ends in 3 days." "Not necessarily," Tanaka replied, her jaw set. "They've given us something valuable. They've shown us their arrogance. They believe we're predictable. They believe we'll choose survival over freedom, like 8,607 species before us. Won't we?" Hartley asked. "What's the alternative? Fight and die? At least integration preserves something of humanity, even if it's just memories in a database." Tanaka turned to look at both of them, and they saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. It was dangerous and desperate and absolutely human. "The alternative," she said slowly, "is we show them that humanity doesn't fit their calculations. We show them that some things matter more than survival. And we make sure that if humanity ends, we end on our own terms." "You're talking about a final message," Blackwood said, understanding dawning. "You want to fight. I want to give every human being a choice. And I want to show the galaxy what happens when you push humanity into a corner. Win or lose, they'll remember us." That's more than those empty shells back there can say. The shuttle streaked toward Earth, carrying 3 people who now carried the weight of humanity's final decision. Behind them, the hegemony fleet waited with eternal patience, confident in the outcome. They had done this thousands of times before. They had never done it with humans. The message went out across every human colony, every station, every ship, floating in the vast darkness of space. Director Tanaka's face appeared on billions of screens, and for the first time in her career, she wasn't speaking as a politician or a bureaucrat. She was speaking as a human being, facing the end of everything she knew. By now, you've all heard about the hegemony, she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. You've seen their ships. You've heard their demands. I've just returned from meeting with them, and I need to tell you the truth without any diplomatic coding. They don't want to destroy us. They want something worse. They want to erase who we are while keeping our bodies alive. They want to turn us into perfect, empty things that serve their vision of order. She paused, letting that sink in across countless worlds. I've seen what integration means. I've spoken to beings who were once like us, who had dreams and fears and loves and hates. Now they're content. Perfectly, horribly content. They don't miss their old lives because they can't miss anything. That part of them is gone. They're tools that think they're happy. On Mars, in the domed cities that humanity had built with blood and determination, people gathered in public squares. On the orbital platforms around Jupiter, workers stopped their shifts to listen. In the deep space colonies that pushed the boundaries of human exploration, families held each other as the words washed over them. The hegemony has given us 72 hours to surrender, Tanaka continued. They've told us that resistance is futile, that they've done this thousands of times, that we should be grateful for the chance to join something greater than ourselves. They believe we'll choose survival over freedom, because that's what every other species has chosen. Her eyes hardened, and something fierce burned in them. But we're not every other species. We're human. And humanity has a long history of choosing the hard path when the easy one meant giving up who we are. So I'm not going to order you to fight. I'm not going to order you to surrender. I'm going to give you a choice that the hegemony never expected us to have. On Earth, in the council chambers, General Aze watched the broadcast with tears streaming down his weathered face. Dr. Blackwood sat beside him, her hand gripping his arm. They knew what was coming. They had argued about it for hours. In the end, they had agreed it was the only way. Every ship, every station, every colony has been equipped with what we're calling the final protocol, Tanaka explained. It's a weapon we've been developing in secret for the last decade, originally designed as a last defense against extinction-level threats. It taps into the quantum vacuum, creating a cascade reaction that can tear apart matter at the subatomic level. We've never tested it at full scale because the simulations showed it would work once and only once. The energy release would be catastrophic. Captain Torres stood on the bridge of the Vigilance, looking at her crew. Young Hassan had stopped crying an hour ago, his face now set with determination. Commander Volkov stood at attention, waiting for orders he knew would be his last. Around the solar system, 19 other defense cruisers held position, their crews making the same terrible calculation. If we activate the final protocol simultaneously across all our positions, Tanaka's voice continued, the cascade will spread through the entire solar system within minutes. Nothing will survive. Not us. Not Earth. Not the hegemony fleet. We will turn our entire system into an expanding sphere of pure destruction. And before we do, we'll broadcast a message that will reach every corner of the galaxy. The director leaned forward, and her next words were spoken with absolute conviction. We're going to tell the galaxy that humanity chose extinction over slavery. We're going to show them that there are species who will burn their own worlds rather than become hollow puppets. And we're going to make sure that the hegemony understands that their perfect order has a cost. Every time they approach another species from now on, they'll remember what happened here. They'll remember that some civilizations cannot be integrated. Some cannot be conquered. Some would rather become a warning written in fire across the stars. In small apartments and massive space stations, humans began to cry. Not from fear, but from a strange mixture of pride and grief. They cried for the children who would never grow up, for the art that would never be created, for the discoveries that would never be made. They cried for everything humanity could have been, but they also understood what Tanaka was offering them. A choice, a final act of defiance, a chance to control their own ending. You have 12 hours to decide, Tanaka said softly. If you want to take your chances with integration, board the evacuation transports. We'll send you to the hegemony. Maybe you'll find peace there. Maybe some part of you will survive in their collective. I won't judge anyone who makes that choice. Survival is a valid answer. She stood, and her voice grew stronger. But if you want to stand with me, if you want to tell the universe that humanity will not go quietly into someone else's order, then stay where you are. Be with the people you love. Say the things you need to say, and when the time comes, we'll light a fire that will be seen across the galaxy for 1,000,000 years. We'll make sure that even after we're gone, the universe knows that humanity was here, that we mattered, that we chose freedom over everything else. The broadcast ended, and the countdown began. On the sovereign dawn, Archon Zethriel watched the human transmission with something approaching confusion. In 8,000 years of integration, no species had ever responded this way. Threats of violence, yes. Desperate negotiation attempts, certainly. But this calm acceptance of total extinction, this willingness to destroy everything rather than submit, was unprecedented. They're bluffing, one of the other Archons suggested. No species would actually follow through with this. But Zethriel wasn't certain. It had seen something in Director Tanaka's eyes during their meeting, something that didn't fit the standard behavioral models. It had dismissed it then as primitive emotion. Now it wondered if it had miscalculated. Across the solar system, the evacuation transports waited. Some humans boarded them, choosing the slim hope of integration over certain death. There was no shame in it. Survival was encoded in every living thing. But most stayed. They stayed in their homes, holding their families. They stayed at their posts, doing their jobs until the last moment. They stayed because Tanaka had given them something more precious than survival. She had given them agency, the power to choose their own ending. Captain Torres walked through the Vigilance one final time, stopping to speak with each crew member. Hassan showed her pictures of his family on Earth, making her promise to remember their faces. Volkov shared a bottle of vodka he had been saving, the cheap kind that burned going down. They toasted to humanity, to stubbornness, to the magnificent foolishness of choosing death over compromise. Do you think it matters? Hassan asked quietly. Will anyone remember us after this? Torres looked out at the stars, at the beautiful indifferent universe that had birthed humanity and would erase it without noticing. I think we're about to become the galaxy's most terrifying ghost story. Every species that the hegemony approaches from now on will hear about us. They'll hear about the humans who destroyed themselves rather than surrender. Some will think we were crazy. Some will think we were brave. But all of them will remember that we had a choice, and we chose to burn. She smiled, and it was fierce and sad and utterly human. That's immortality of a kind. Director Tanaka sat in her office on Earth, watching the sun rise over Geneva for the last time. She had said goodbye to everyone who mattered. She had written letters that would never be sent, prayers that would never be answered. Now she waited with the patience of someone who had made peace with the impossible. Her console showed the countdown. 3 minutes remaining. Across the solar system, every human installation was synchronized. When the moment came, they would all activate together. The final protocol would turn matter into energy, energy into destruction, destruction into a message that would echo through the cosmos. She thought about all the species that had chosen integration. She didn't blame them. Life was precious. Survival was rational. But rationality had never been humanity's strongest trait. Humans were the species that had climbed mountains because they were there, that had sailed unknown oceans, hoping to find new lands, that had reached for the stars knowing the void could kill them. Humanity had always been magnificently, stubbornly irrational when it came to freedom. 2 minutes. On the Sovereign Dawn, Archon Zethriel made a decision that it would later record as the moment it first understood fear. It opened a communication channel to all human positions. "Stop," it transmitted. "We withdraw our integration requirement. Your system will be quarantined. You will be left alone. Do not activate your weapon." But the message came too late, or perhaps humanity had never intended to listen. 1 minute. Across billions of screens, a final transmission appeared. It was simple, just text against black. Tanaka had written it herself during the long night before the dawn. To whoever finds this message drifting through the ruins of our solar system, we were humanity. We were flawed and brilliant, violent and loving, petty and profound. We made mistakes. We hurt each other. We built beautiful things and destroyed them in moments of madness. We were everything the hegemony wanted to fix, to perfect, to erase. But we were ours. We belonged to ourselves. And when faced with the choice between perfect slavery and imperfect freedom, we chose freedom. We chose to end on our own terms rather than live on someone else's. Let this burning system be our legacy. Let it be a warning to any species that thinks they can take what makes others unique and reshape it into their image of order. Some things cannot be conquered. Some things cannot be integrated. Some things would rather become light and heat and memory than submit. We were human. We were here. We mattered. Remember us. The countdown reached 0, and humanity kept its final promise. The solar system didn't explode all at once. It began at the positions where the defense cruisers held station, where the quantum vacuum tore open and matter ceased to exist in any meaningful way. The cascade spread at the speed of light, beautiful and terrible, turning planets and moons and ships into expanding spheres of pure energy. Earth burned last, giving those on the surface a few extra seconds to look up at the sky and watch the stars go out one by one. Some people were afraid. Some were calm. Some held each other and whispered words of love into the final darkness. Director Yuki Tanaka stood at her window and watched the light coming. She thought about her daughter, integrated into the hegemony databases now, preserved but not alive. She thought about all the choices that had led to this moment. She wondered if she had made the right call. Then the light reached Geneva, and wondering became irrelevant. The hegemony fleet tried to retreat, but the cascade moved faster than their ships could flee. 47 massive vessels, each one a marvel of technology thousands of years beyond human achievement, were torn apart in seconds. Archon Zethriel's last thought was not fear or anger, but profound confusion. It had integrated thousands of species. It had seen every possible response to the offer of perfection. It had never imagined that anyone would choose this. The light faded after 17 hours. What remained of the solar system was a debris field slowly expanding into the void, cooling matter that had once been worlds and ships and billions of living beings. Radio waves carrying Tanaka's final message spread outward at the speed of light. A ripple of information moving through the darkness. It would take years to reach the nearest inhabited systems. Decades to reach the core worlds of the hegemony. Centuries to spread across the galaxy, but it would spread. and every species that heard it would have to reckon with a simple, terrible truth. Humanity had looked at the choice between survival and freedom, between integration and extinction, between perfect slavery and imperfect death, and humanity had chosen to burn. The galaxy would remember. The hegemony would remember. And somewhere in the vast archives of accumulated knowledge from thousands of integrated species, a new file would be created. A warning. A ghost story. A reminder that some species could not be predicted, could not be controlled, could not be made perfect. Some species, when cornered, would rather become a warning than a victim. The file would be labeled simply, Humanity Unintegrable. Approach with extreme caution. They chose fire. And in the silence that followed, where a solar system had once orbited a yellow sun, the void itself seemed to whisper with the echoes of 8 billion voices saying the same thing in their final moments. We were here. We mattered. We were free. Remember us. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.